Welcome to the Power Lunch. This is Rhett Power. I am your host. We do the show every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and sometimes at other times when the opportunity presents itself. Coming to you live today from Brazil. I'm down here for a couple of weeks on a project, and so it's a special edition of sorts. Hoping that all the technology works. But we bring this program to you because we want to talk, we want to learn from the best. The point of the show is to talk to leaders, CEOs, thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing really great work that can help us all. And that's what we want to do. We want to learn from the best. And that's my promise to you, is to bring you the best every week. Now, the fun part about this show is that it can be interactive. You have to ask your questions. You can send questions via LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, because that's where we broadcast all at the same time. And we can do that because Social Live has a platform that lets us do it. So please ask your questions. I know that my guest today, Dr. Suzy Burke, will certainly participate on answering questions online if we don't get to them on the show, but let's try to get to them on the show. So ask your questions. Now, as I promised, Dr. Suzy Burke is one of the best out there. She has a PhD in social and organizational psychology from Columbia University. She's a National Institute of Mental Health scholar. She has been a senior executive at Fortune 20 companies and a startup entrepreneur. So she knows her stuff. And she now runs her own executive coaching practice. Suzy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rhett. It's great to see you.
It's good to talk again. We do talk pretty regularly. So
yes, we do pretty much every day.
But it's good to do it in this forum because I think you have a lot to offer. And today I really wanted to talk about, and I know you wanted to talk about unconscious bias and how that impacts women and lots of minorities as well, how that impacts people in the workplace. So what is unconscious bias? I mean, I've learned a lot about that in the last year, but I think it's fascinating. What is unconscious bias?
Unconscious bias is the process that leads us to jump to conclusions about people based on characteristics, whether it's race, gender, sexuality, ability, anything that has nothing to do with the actual person, based on experiences of others like them and things that we see in movies and so on through life. So it's assuming that you know something about someone when you actually know nothing about them. And having those preconceived ideas shape your perceptions about what they're able to do, what they're capable of. So it really...
Isn't that natural? I mean,
Of course it is.
I mean, don't we sort of in microseconds sort of form opinions about people?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I think, going back thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, I think those kinds of unconscious biases first surfaced through safety issues, that needing to recognize danger when you saw it so that you could get away and survive. But we're not in that situation anymore. So it takes, to me, the value of speaking about unconscious bias is it brings it into people's awareness. And once you're aware of it, you can fight it.
How does it?
Your action.
So let's take it down to the workplace. How does it manifest itself in the workplace?
Oh gosh, well, endlessly. Women have 60% of all undergraduate and graduate degrees, but less than 5% of Fortune 500 companies have women CEOs. And there are no women of color now that Ursula Burns left Xerox and Indra Nooyi left PepsiCo. 20% of the equity partnerships in U.S. Law firms go to women. 80% are men. Every American president has been white, despite the fact that 30 other countries, large and small, have had women presidents. In fact, there's a wonderful kind of sad story. I worked with a guy named Bob DiCarlo years ago, and we were having morning coffee one day. And he said, I've got to tell you what happened yesterday. My wife took our granddaughter to the library. We got out a book about presidents, and we read together about George Washington, Abe Lincoln, FDR, JFK. We got to the end of the book, and my granddaughter said to my wife, "So, Nana, what about the lady presidents?" And my wife said, "Honey, there are no lady presidents." The little girl said, "You're kidding." And I thought it was so wonderful that little girl couldn't imagine a world when there wouldn't be a woman in the White House. Yet that was 15 years ago. We're not really much closer today. You and I were just having a conversation about the electability of some terrific women who are running for president right now in the Democratic Party. It shows up in all sorts of ways. Let's close your eyes and ask our guests to close your eyes. Close your eyes.
Okay.
Right, you're not closing your eyes.
Well, I'm closing. I'm closing. A little weird.
Take a moment. Visualize a leader. Who comes to mind? You can open them. Who did you see?
I saw Abraham Lincoln.
You saw a white man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people visualize a white man. And in fact, there's a really interesting article on HBO the other day. The military did this huge study of men and women, both objective and subjective evaluations. And the women scored equally well on the objective evaluations, fitness tests, test scores, and so on. The subjective evaluations were very different. Men were described as analytical. Women were described as compassionate. You're in the military, you want to promote somebody to be leader. Who are you going to pick? Right?
Right.
Men only received 2 negative attributions. They were sometimes told that they could be arrogant and irresponsible. Women were told that they were gossipy, selfish, frivolous, inept, vain.
Really?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if those are the preconceptions that people carry in their minds about women as leaders, what chance do they have, right? I mean, it's a real problem because, part of it is just how we're raised. But part of it is that because of these unconscious biases, men typically get specific performance feedback that enables them to know what they need to work on, the actions that they need to take to get promoted. When you get this vague feedback that has nothing to do with anything, and it doesn't help them think about how they can grow their careers, how they can take opportunities to be promoted to more powerful positions. They also don't get sponsors. It's easy for men to get a sponsor. Women just are afraid to ask, and when they ask, they're kind of pushed away. Xerox went through a phase where every high performance leader, and I was one of them, was granted somewhere on the CEO's team. So I happened to get the guy who was running manufacturing. And he, in our first meeting, he said, you're terrific. You know a lot of stuff. I think you need a job where your performance can really be clearly visible to anyone. No one can ever question that you actually did this job and succeeded on your own.
Right.
I think you should either go to Egypt or China. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've got a family. I can't just pick up my family and move to Egypt. And there were certainly lots of possible jobs in the U.S. that he could have recommended, but he didn't, because he couldn't think of me taking one of the jobs that's typically taken by men, right? Wow. So I mean, that wasn't very helpful for me. Men are hired on their potential. Men are hired on their track record.
Yeah.
If you never get a chance to do anything, you never get the chance to build a track record. When women don't succeed, it's due to lack of ability. When men don't succeed, people think they just didn't try hard enough. There are all these biases that shape how we think day in and day out. And
does it come into play, let's say it comes down to a couple candidates. What does it come to? I mean, does it come down to what people look like, dress like? Does it come down to where they went to school? I mean, are those some of those? They look like me. I mean, I guess I didn't realize. I guess we do. We make those kind of judgments about people, but how else does it play out?
Well, it plays out first of all, in the pipeline, right? Women typically don't get a chance to even be considered. And, there's this thing called the similarity attraction paradigm. People are more comfortable with people who are like them. They share experiences.
Okay.
So when I meet a woman, I naturally feel that we've got all these things in common, even if I've just met her 5 minutes ago, because we share life experiences at some level. And because of the shared experience, there's a sense that they just get me, right? So I'm more comfortable with someone who just gets me, and I don't have to be explaining to myself all the time. And it creates a sense of belonging and stability. If you want to change that common practice of hiring in your own image, you have to make a conscious effort to do something about it.
So I got a job once because I like to sail, and we ended up with a hiring manager getting into a conversation about sailing for some reason, and I got the job.
Yep.
I might not have been the best for the job, but because we made a connection on some personal level.
Yep.
So that's what that was, wasn't it?
Yep. I'm coaching a young woman right now who was a competitive roller skater in high school, of all things. And she got her first job at Goldman Sachs because they thought that if you're a competitive roller skater, you must be a tough bitch, right? They thought she would fit in. But to counteract that at an organizational level, there are systems that you can put in place. I'm working with a large organization that has recently made a serious commitment to diversity. They realized that their entire senior team was white. So they agreed that they did something structural. In every search that they ran, they were going to make sure that at least 2 of the 4 finalists were people of color. So I was talking to the boss the other day, and he said, that made it change everything that we did. We had to search in different places. We had to hire different kinds of executive search firms.
Right.
We had to network in different places. But, the great news is that works. Yeah. They've recently, last year, they've hired 7 people, and 6 of them are people of color. And having people of color on that senior team, because they're very committed to, and it's not a team of 10, it's a team of probably 40. So it's not over the top, but having 6 people at that level in that organization is going to change how they think about their business, their mission, their goals, who's going to be attracted to them, who's going to feel affiliated with them. But it took a conscious effort, a change in the system.
So that's interesting because you can help organizations put those systems in place.
Yep.
So that because I know that the research around diversity and inclusion, if you don't do it for the right reasons, there's certainly a lot of business cases for it to do it because the numbers, the way it increases innovation and sales and profitability and the numbers are there, and the research
they're compelling.
The research is pretty solid.
Yep.
So that's good that I know you've done a lot of work around putting systems in place and helping people fix that problem. What made you passionate about this issue?
Well, as a little girl, I had great parents, and as a little girl, I got mixed messages from my parents. I was told every day that whatever I did, I could succeed, that I was smart, lovable, whatever. At the same time, I clearly remember my mother telling me that I had to be careful not to show up the boys, and I certainly couldn't beat them in sporting events. So, there's that. And I don't think that she realized that she was teaching me about gender bias. But, in the first place that I worked, the organization was incredibly high integrity organization and very committed to equity. So they had systems in place that led to equitable outcomes. They had this thing called balanced workforce, where at the department and division level, anything of value, performance appraisal, a promotion, the opportunity to participate on a high visibility team, those perks were doled out in proportion to the number of people of different groups in the population. So for instance, I had a team of half men and half women, and I had a big team. So of all the performance appraisals that came out of my group, half of the 5 reviews had to go to women. They couldn't all go to the men. We had 20% minorities. So, 20% of the 5 ovaries needed to go to the minorities. And I took that practice with me when I left Xerox to another company. And the first time we sat down for performance appraisal reviews, I had done the analysis and all the 5s went to the white guys. We had probably 50 account operations managers in this business, and I knew a lot of them pretty well. So we're sitting around the table and looking at all the white guys got the 5s. I'm like, what about Andre Josephat? He's a terrific AOM. He's got a big account. It's growing. The client loves him. There are no operational issues. What about Andre? Well, and I said, what about Andre? Come on. Now think about it. What makes him not as good as Mike Chaccio? And they're like, well, maybe you're right. We send them all back. And do it all again, a do-over. But once I could help my team realize that their own biases, their assumptions about who was able to grow as a leader and who couldn't, was a function of their own blind spots, their own assumptions about people of color and about women that had nothing to do with their actual performance.
Okay, well, I understand that. But why did that make you passionate about this issue?
I guess because I was raised that fairness matters, right? That's why I care about racial justice.
Okay.
Women have tremendous gifts to bring to organizations, as do people of color. And as a woman, and as someone who has lots of friends of color, it's so frustrating to know that you've got to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, be twice as fast, twice as smart, and even yet you don't get the opportunities. You and I were talking to someone the other day, a black fellow, who's fabulous. He said, I got a bachelor's degree and I know he's smart. I know he's a gifted writer. He's got tremendous potential, tremendous capabilities. And he couldn't get the jobs he wanted. So he went back and got a master's degree. He went back and got a PhD. And still, he's struggling to be recognized as the leader that he is.
Right.
And it's frustrating. It's wrong. It's annoying. It impacts American businesses. I went to the Tuskegee Air Museum in May as part of a trip to Alabama. And I happened to be there with the wife of a Tuskegee airman. They were amazing pilots, incredible success on their fighter runs. And this fellow got out of the Army, got out of the Air Force, and he went to college at Amherst. And no one would speak to him except his professors who had to. He wanted to work in the airline business. So he went to University of Chicago, got an MBA at Chicago. Mm-hmm. He could only get a job as a mechanic. American Airlines, United Airlines, no one would hire him because he was black.
Wow.
That's just wrong. And on a personal level, it's wrong. It's wrong in terms of, America's got to be more competitive than we are, and more competitive all the time. So that these artificial barriers are keeping American businesses from promoting those who can make fabulous contributions. It's just, we're going to fall behind if we don't wake up.
Yeah, no doubt about that. What do you think? What role do you think confidence plays? I mean, I think, because is some of it, or some of the problems that women face. Well, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. Is it confidence, or is it they're not asking? Are men more aggressive? I mean, comes from your research, and your doctorate in psychology. I mean, are women? Are they different in that way?
It's a both and. I mean, part of it's the organizational, the biases that impact people. But women share those own biases, by the way. They don't see themselves as leaders. In a recent study, 9 out of 10 said they didn't feel confident enough to ask for a sponsor. 3 out of 4 didn't feel confident enough to ask for access to senior leaders. 65% were reluctant to ask for promotion. So women own some part of this, and so do people of color, by the way. If there's a job posting with 10 qualifications, if a man's got 5, he's like, I'm good for it. Women feel like they've got to have 10 out of 10 before they'll even dare to apply. So women have to, and there's some mechanism for doing it. They've got to do what they can to counteract this unconscious bias in the workplace.
What can they do?
These,
I mean, what are some
well,
tools? If you're let's break it down to really practical things here. If you're a woman, you wanna climb that corporate ladder, you want to get that next job, that next promotion. How can you combat those biases that exist?
you fake it till you make it. You eat nails for breakfast. So,
What does that mean?
well,
I mean, really?
one last study, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore, Dave, but these guys, Schlenker and Larry, did a pioneering study, and they found that people who made optimistic predictions to others about their performance were rated as twice as competent as people who gave pessimistic performances about their performance, even when the results were horrible. And women often self-handicap. They say, well, I'm not going to be very good at this, or I'm not sure you should choose me because I don't really have the background. When you start talking like that, people think you're exactly right. You don't. So you've got to present yourself as competent and confident, knowing that if you can get the job, you're going to figure it out. Because women are, if they're anything, they're clever, smart, able to draw on resources, and they can figure it out. Because people believe, go ahead.
But it's not just like acting like your male colleagues.
No, it's being authentic in your own right, but being confident in your own abilities, right? Not being afraid to.
How do you do that? How do you change those? How do you change? How do you make that? If that's not you naturally, you're highly, competent. You're highly skilled, but it's not your natural way. How do you?
Well, not to promote myself, but a good way to do it is to hire a coach, someone who can give you that objective perspective on yourself.
Okay.
Collect the data that lets people know how others see them, and help them figure out what their key blind spots are, and give them behavioral solutions to their blind spots. So, for instance, many of the people that I'm coaching have an issue with executive presence, not being able to really show up as leaders, and it presents itself in a number of ways. Being in a meeting and only speaking when you're spoken to, and these are director level people, right? Mm-hmm. Being unwilling to have an opinion if it's not about my business unit. Raising their hands and volunteering for tough projects.
Right.
And I think having a coach can give you the tools and the awareness and the ability to do some of those things. One of the things I talk to the people I coach about is visualization, because I believe in it so firmly. If you can, when I've got a big speech or big something to do, I practice it in my mind over and over. I see myself at the end of the speech with people standing on their feet, giving me a standing ovation, right?
Right.
Because I've just hit the ball out of the park. Right. And if I do that enough, by the time I'm in the circumstance, my head is there. I think, damn, I'm good. I can do this. I think self-talk really helps. There's a wonderful, I don't know if you saw it, there was a Netflix documentary called Knock Down the House. It followed 5 people who were running for House of Representative women in the most recent election.
Right.
4 of them didn't make it, 1 did. And they've got a 30-second clip of this one young woman. She's about to debate a very senior guy in the House of Representatives. And before the debate starts, she says to herself, he's going to tell me I'm small. He's going to tell me I'm stupid. He's going to tell me I'm not mature enough. I'm not experienced enough. I'm not smart enough. I am smart enough. I am mature enough. I am experienced. I can do this. And she killed him in the debate, right? So there's that. And there are these famous I mean, I've got a young woman I coach. I tell her, like, before these big meetings, because she's a founder in an organization just filled with testosterone, right? But she's brilliant. She's a scientist. But before these big meetings, go into the bathroom, practice your power poses. Listen to the Rocky music, get yourself psyched.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it works. This stuff works.
It does work. Yeah.
And I think on a smaller basis, if you're on a team project, when someone says who's going to give the presentation, raise your hand. Because if you don't raise your hand, it's the guy who's going to get picked. Make sure that people know if you're on a team project, take a piece of the project that can be associated with you, so that your work doesn't get lost.
Right.
Yep. And so that your work doesn't get lost in everybody else, and it becomes Bob's work or Frank's work or Rhett's work, right? Make it a priority to build a network of supportive people who can encourage you, coach you, counsel you, connect you with their networks.
That's really important, I think. Yeah, that's a really important point.
network. All these things can help women and people of color get support from their own teams, because it matters. But I do think,
how about asking for a mentor? We talked a little bit about, you said sponsor. I was thinking mentor, but really pursuing that aspect of it too within the company.
Absolutely. And choosing the right person. It's got to be someone senior enough to be able to, because to me, a sponsor, when there's an opening, someone says, hey, choose Suzy, she's ready. It's great to have a peer who can give you feedback, but it's not the same as having a sponsor who has access to all the opportunities in the organization that you actually need to have access to. It doesn't need to be a woman if you're a woman, or a person of color if you're a person of color, but just someone who can connect with you, can believe in you, will advocate for you.
It shows motivation to me. It shows like you're interested in growing.
Absolutely. And again, people generally respond to that kind of positive excitement and desire to grow and contribute to the corporation. And of course, then when you get the job, you've got to do the work and succeed.
You said something earlier that I wanted to go back to. You talked about executive presence. Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation with the guest yesterday about this. We all know I'm going to mention another white guy, but we all know the John Kennedys of the world, right? That walk into a room and light up the room and have this natural charisma, right? Is that executive presence, in your opinion, teachable?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Because it's, executive presence is a combination of gravitas, communication skills, and how you actually appear. The physical appearance is the least important of the three, but if you don't have that one right, you don't get in the door. So people have to pay attention to that. We can all improve our communication skills, and that's something that's worth really working on. If you've got to, get instruction, get coaching, take a class, it's definitely worth learning how to present your ideas in public in a meaningful and impactful way. And gravitas is about knowing what you're talking about.
It's confidence, isn't it?
It's knowledge and it's confidence. It's a combination of the two.
Okay.
Because if you're confident but you don't have any basis of your confidence, people discover that.
That's actually arrogance.
And people discover it really quickly, right?
Right.
So you need to know what you're talking about, but then you've got to have the confidence to present yourself as, hey, I'm the expert.
Okay.
And go with it and have confidence in it and own it every step of the way.
I think we can have some questions. Let's
cool.
Let's look on social media here. Got a bunch of hellos. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Very good. Dr. Jackson, good to have Dr. Terry Jackson on.
Hey, Terry, how are you?
He asked, how does a woman develop executive presence as opposed to a man? Let me see if I'm missing. Okay. How often are women told that they must develop their executive presence? How do you do that as a woman as opposed to a man?
I suspect that because women aren't seen as executives, they don't get the feedback nearly as often as men do. If they're being coached by me, they get it a lot. And I think a lot of coaches know the importance of executive presence. So I think, as that becomes more visible, I think it will increase. I actually think that everyone works on executive presence in fundamentally the same way.
Okay.
It's about women have a steeper hill to climb because they're not seen as executives because of this, the issue of the likability factor. Women are supposed to be nice and not tough, gentle and not decisive. So they've got to combat that. But it really is about becoming a subject matter expert in something, having the confidence to stand up and say, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Presenting, being able to communicate your ideas crisply and clearly and concisely so that people want to listen to you. And I find that, again, if you act like you belong, people think you do. The very first time, my first job at Xerox, I led the Corporate Competency Center for Attitude Surveys and Selection Testing. At Xerox at the time, we surveyed 100,000 employees every year. It was my job to go to the executive team and present the survey results. So the first time I walked into this big conference room on the 29th floor, huge mahogany table filled the room. There were chairs around the table and there were chairs along the side. And there were some people sitting at the side. I walked into the room and I stopped for a minute. I caught my breath. There was an open seat near the front of the table. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to sit on the side. I'm just going to go up sitting like I belong. I sat down at this chair. And by the way, I was terrified. I didn't do that lightly, but I thought to myself, this is my chance, right?
Right.
If I act like I belong at the table, people are going to think I do. And someone else was presenting before I got a chance to, and I actually asked a question of the other guy's presentation, because that's another way to say, you know what, I belong at this table. And again, the men that I coach have issues with executive presence as well. And it's the same advice. Know what you're talking about, have confidence in your successes, your experiences, your knowledge, and don't be shy about it. This guy named Francis Bacon said something. He said, brag daringly because something's going to stick.
Right.
Brag daringly because something's going to stick.
Indeed.
So it's about just being confident in yourself and fighting the demons in you that say you're not that good. You really shouldn't be there. You don't belong at this table. Just put all that stuff out of your head. Don't listen to it. Just don't listen to it. Don't pay attention, as my mom would say.
So I got another question. How do we get white men in an effort? How do we get them to understand that diversity and inclusion pay major dividends for organizations?
Since I'm a social scientist by training, I believe in data. I think the data about organizational performance is compelling. Catalyst does this. That makes an impact on the business results. Catalyst does a study every year, and their most recent one showed that women where there are a lot of women leaders, organizations have a 35% higher ROE than organizations without women leaders, and a 34% higher return on something else that I can't remember. But I mean, the data are compelling, and I would suggest, and this is making me think maybe you need to write about this. The data about the power of unconscious bias, the data about the cost that organizations pay because of it, and what you can do to counteract it.
It seems to me, I just sort of off the top of my head, that in a lot of organizations, in a lot of cases, it actually probably would pay and be worth it to bring an outside organization in to be
absolutely,
because it's more than just quotas and
absolutely
things like. I mean, we're to put a real program in that actually gets the results that you're talking about. I think it warrants bringing in somebody from the outside to really help the organization change it, because it's actually about culture shift, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about numbers. It's actually about changing culture. Because
exactly,
just because you bring more people of color or more women into the organization doesn't mean you're bringing them into the club. And,
right.
and what it means is you're opening the doors to the club and saying everybody can come in and.
But once they're in, they have to feel welcome.
Right.
They have to feel equal. They have to feel. It's interesting because law firms have done a lot of diversity hiring, and they recruit these associates from the top law schools, people of color typically, and they come in and they stay for a year or two and then they leave because the law firm's doing it to make a quota. And these young Black men and women feel like they don't belong. They're not given big cases. They're not included in the important discussions. They're in the club, but they're sitting at those outside chairs, right? They're not in the center circle. And quite frankly, because of their creds and their knowledge and their skills, they don't need to stay there. They can go someplace else that's more open to actually accepting them as equal members of the organization, equal members of the leadership team.
Right.
And it is a culture change for sure. And the other thing, there's a lot of evidence about diversity programs not working because companies think they can bring in an outsider and do 2 days of training and zip, the organization has changed. And it doesn't happen that way at all. It's a multi-year effort that takes honest and sincere commitment, deeply embedded from the very top to cascade down. Because if the leaders of the organization don't buy it at a very gut level, it's not going to happen. They'll go through the motions, they say the words, spend a lot of money, and nothing changes.
Right. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Suzy, for joining us, joining the audience, answering questions from social media. And let me check. I'm going to check one other platform to see if we got any questions over there. And let's see here. Anything from our friends over on Facebook. Let's see. Nothing there. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Power Lunch live on LinkedIn. And we do this every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday around 12 noon. Thank you so much for asking questions today. Thank you so much for being here. A couple things to keep in mind. You can check out the upcoming schedule for Power Lunch on our website, powerlunch.live. And that's with the .live. That is a website. And we've got a great show coming up Tuesday with Jeffrey Haslett from CNBC. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And let's see. Also, we can do conferences, events. If you want us to come and do the Power Lunch at your event or at your trade show, we're happy to do it. Happy to broadcast live and interview your speakers and your guests. And so reach out to us through the website to do that. Anyway, again, thank you for joining us. Suzy, Dr. Suzy Burke, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
All right.